Livestock Association in Kansas Farm Bureau. I want to thank you all for coming tonight. We're really excited about celebrating that state football championship with six-man football for Natoma. So with that, we've asked Pastor Stacy of the Paradise United Methodist Church to offer a short prayer before we get started this evening.
Let us pray. Loving and merciful God, we thank you for this opportunity to gather together with our friends and our neighbors, to share some moments to visit, to share ideas and resources. We give you thanks for the food that has been shared and prepared and offered for us this evening. We also come to you tonight thanking you for all those folks, especially the firefighters and emergency responders that work so hard to protect us. We thank you for all those agencies, all those people, all those organizations that are represented here tonight. And we just pray that our time and the information and resources that are shared will help bring relief and restoration to those in need. And also may our time tonight bring glory to your holy name. And it is in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. This evening, looking forward to several folks sharing all sorts of great information with us tonight. But I'd like to start us off with our Secretary of Agriculture for the state of Kansas, Secretary Mike Bean.
Thank you, Brendan. And I want to thank those responsible for putting this meeting together. I think it's going to be quite helpful, and I look forward to learning from them as well. And I assume you will be not bashful about asking questions, so maybe we can all learn tonight. I've had the chance over the years in my profession to meet quite a few of you in the crowd, and the two times I've been up here since December 15th, I've had a chance to meet even more of you. And I want to thank you for all you're doing. I could mention a lot of people, but I do want to mention Keith Haber, your at least the Russell County Emergency Coordinator, has been very helpful to me coordinating in our office there for a while on a daily basis on what was happening. And then today showing us around some sites and visiting with some more people. So if we can do any more, you're going to hear from another representative of the Department of Ag, but if there's anything we can do, please let us know. At this time, I would like to introduce Governor Kelly, to ask her to come forward, but she's been very much engaged in this process. I know her and I were on the phone just a day or two after the event, and she has been very engaged and interested in what's happening and how it can be helpful, and spent the afternoon here. And I'm going to ask her to come forward and make a few remarks. So if you would, welcome Governor Laura Kelly.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening, everybody. I need to give a special shout out also to Keith Haber. Yeah, I'm sure most of you know him, and if you don't, you need to get to know him. He has done incredible work on your behalf since this tragedy happened. He has been around the clock, nonstop, and not only doing good work, but doing work beyond the usual work of an emergency manager in not only trying to get the resources and what you need in order to work through this disaster, but also to be a friend and reaching out to folks and providing some social support. So Keith, thank you very much. You are the epitome of an emergency manager. We're very lucky to have you. Yeah. Yeah, I did come out earlier today, and I was able to go to a number of homes, some that were no longer there, talk with a number of people who have been severely impacted by this. And I know that there are more of you in the audience. I want to thank everybody who did meet with me today, the Maupins, the Chrysler's in particular, and for sharing your stories with me. It's important that I know how this has impacted you. It's obvious. There's some things that are very obvious, but really hearing you tell the story and recognizing what an incredibly deep and powerful wound this has inflicted upon some, and how that we as a state cannot come out here for a week or two and help, but that we need to stay in constant touch over the next at least a year, probably longer, as we really work through this. This is not going to be something that we can resolve. You can resolve in a week or two. This is going to take a long time. So we need to be sure to stick with you through this time. I do want to thank all of the folks who were on the ground right as this happened, all of the first responders. It was incredible response work by them. From the EMTs, your volunteer firefighters, to the Forest Service coming in, to Wildlife and Parks, all sorts of folks coming out as soon as the fire struck and working to mitigate the damage, but also then to start the recovery. So, what I saw today was heart-wrenching, to say the least. The fields, the homes, but it was also in some ways heartwarming, because I also, in addition to hearing about the really tragic things that have happened to folks, I heard about the really wonderful things that others are doing. The neighbor helping neighbor, rancher helping rancher, folks from out of state coming up and really trying to provide unsolicited aid and recovery. The folks working at the United Methodist Church, providing meals, 3 times a day for 2 weeks at this point. It's really incredible to see that spirit of folks coming together and helping one another. And so I thank all of you for doing that. As I told somebody earlier, I think you might be getting paid back for all the times that you've reached out to help others in need. So, but don't hesitate to take their help. You need it and you deserve it. So as governor, I'm the boss of the state agencies, and I want to give a shout out to our state employees and our state agencies that have done so much so far, and will be doing more to help us during this time. I think I heard, as I was talking with folks today at Wildlife and Parks, or Department of Wildlife and Parks has been out here and been incredibly helpful. Obviously, you heard from Secretary Beam, Department of Agriculture. They're intimately involved in all of this and will continue to be over time. Our emergency management, you've got Keith here on the ground. We've got a whole backup team in Topeka working with Keith to make sure that we are responding as robustly and as quickly as we possibly can. I've talked with our Department of Revenue. I had conversations today with a number of people who are very concerned about the cost of fencing. One of the things that we plan to do, we did this back, I used to be in the state Senate, so when I say we, I mean it. In 2016, when the fires were around Ashland, I believe, we passed legislation that eliminated the sales tax on all the supplies and materials for fencing. I'm going to be working with our legislators, some of whom are here. I think Senator Bowers is here, Senator Billinger is here, and Representative Rajas is here. I know Representative Waymaster wanted to be here, and I heard that Representative Wassinger from Hayes may be actually on Zoom listening in. I'll be working with all of them so that we can put that sales tax exemption for fencing materials. And yes, it will be retroactive. So if you've already spent some money on fencing supplies, you'll get reimbursed for the sales tax on that. We hope to fast track that through the legislature, but we also hope to incorporate in that piece of legislation a trigger for this kind of exemption going forward, so that you don't always have to go back to the legislature to get it, that it would just, if something like this happens again, it'll be there. Talked with another part of our agencies, the Department of Health and Environment, which I know they've been involved here, particularly with the livestock. But the other thing that we're going to be doing is looking at all of the your birth certificates, your marriage licenses, your death certificates, all of those kinds of legal documents that you had, and many people have lost those. We will be producing copies of those for you free of charge. We're also going to be working with the Department of Revenue to ensure that if you need your driver's license or any other those kinds of documents replaced, that there will be no charge and they'll be expedited. So we will look for ways to help, and we would welcome if you have suggestions of things that we could do that would make a difference. Please don't hesitate to call. You can either go through Keith or you can come right through the secretary. I'm going to volunteer you, volunteer Mike Beam and the Department of Agriculture, that they will be able to reroute you. In fact, I think you all have set up, and I'm sure that Kelsey will be talking about this, but there is a sort of a one-stop website, recovery, Kansas Recovery, where you can go and you can find access to almost all of the resources available. And as we find new ones, like what KDHE is going to be doing and what Revenue will be doing, we're going to get it up on that website so that you don't have to go searching around for a whole lot of things. And we're also going to be trying to make, you know, the getting the kinds of things that you need, make it as easy as possible, so you're not having to go from agency to agency and place to place. So I just want you to know that we recognize how devastating this is. We recognize how long running this is going to be, and that we are putting all the resources we possibly can into this, and we will continue to do that. And please, as I said, don't hesitate to reach out if you need something. We want to be there for you. Take care.
We'd also like to thank Congressman Tracy Mann for coming to be with us this evening. I'd like to share a few words. Thank you, Congressman.
Well, thank you. I'm going to be very brief. Governor, thank you for being here. Secretary Beam, Brendan, thanks for pulling us together, and Farm Bureau and the KLA and all of our first responders. A lot to, you know, obviously 2 weeks ago, the unthinkable happened 2 weeks ago tonight. And a lot of gratitude goes to everyone that stepped up and got involved over the last couple of weeks. I'm from Quinter. Our family farms and feeds cattle in Quinter. And I hate the occasion, but I'm glad to be in Natoma. My dad used to talk about when Quinter used to play Natoma, and he used to get run over by a guy named Kenny Ziegler. And a lot of good athletes have come through this town over the years. So it's good to be here and in this gym. You know, what happened 2 weeks ago happened that next Thursday morning before the sun came up. We'd been in touch with the Farm Bureau and KLA and talking about putting the plan in place to make sure that as quickly as possible and with the Department of Agriculture, we could get word out about the resources and the things that could be made available. And everyone knows this, but you all are in all of our thoughts and prayers. And that's true of many people around the state. You know, the worst of times tends to bring about the best in people. And you especially see that in Kansans and the outpouring, and a lot of people I know that have helped and will continue to help. I mostly just want to come tonight to listen, to find out what else can be done. I want to make sure that no stone's left unturned to make sure that you all get the help that you need. And also, I wanted to close with this. I'm really glad that we're spending some time tonight talking about mental health resources. My wife, who other than being from Oklahoma, is a pretty good gal, but her family, when she was 6, her family lost their house to a fire. Actually, right now between Christmas and New Year's, and the mental health impact that can, the trauma of that is very real. And so I would just encourage anyone here, if you get in a bad spot mentally or need some help, make sure that you raise your hand and reach out. Those resources are available, and our offices is happy to help with that, or any other needs that you have as you're navigating, as we all are navigating the things that are needed to really tap into the programs in place to help. So thanks for having me, and I will turn it back over to Brendan. Thanks a lot.
I've asked Keith Auber to come over and share with us. I can tell you from spending several days here over the past 2 weeks, a huge debt of gratitude goes out to the volunteer firefighter forces in the area. And Keith's going to say a few things about that.
Good evening. I am Keith Auber. I serve Russell and Ellsworth County as the emergency manager, but I've been a firefighter since 1997. So worst fire I've ever been through in my life. And I've been through quite a few bad fires. First off, to everyone that lost something, whether it was due to the wind or the fire throughout this state of Kansas, my heart goes out to you. I was lucky. I was at the south edge of the fire, and my place didn't get touched except for a little wind damage. But the rest of you, my heart and my thoughts and my prayers go out to you. And if you need anything, please contact me, and I'll try and help any way I can. I do have a list of the fire departments that came and helped in Russell and Ellsworth County, but I would be remiss if I missed someone. I don't know who all responded to Ellis County. Lyle Pantle over here is the assistant fire chief, and he's the emergency manager for Ellis County. Plainville and Rooks County had their own fires, and it's just, I don't want to leave anybody out, so I'm not going to read my list, but I just want to say thank you. I just want to ask for a round of applause for all the firefighters, all the law enforcement. In fact, all the volunteer firefighters that are here, please stand up, if you would. All you guys. I've driven around a lot of the damaged area, especially on the east side, and how you guys got it stopped. It's beyond me. That thing raged through here so bad and ravaged so much. It was truly the perfect storm for a firestorm, and you guys got it stopped, and you stopped any loss of life and property damage from getting any worse than it was. And there's a lot of country that it should have continued to ravage on over to Lincoln County, but it didn't, because y'all got it stopped. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
One more piece that unfortunately in Kansas, our organization and several organizations have been involved with. This is not our first experience in dealing with wildfires across the state and this scale. So we thought it would be good to hear a message from somebody that's been through this. So we reached out to the Giles Ranch. Jenny Bouchard has shared a video with us she made yesterday morning. Their family went through a similar experience, and we'll play that now.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jenny Bouchard. I'm with the Giles Ranch in Clark County, Kansas by Ashland. And I'm sorry I couldn't meet with you in person, but wanted to, give our sincere condolences for what you're going through. We went through a similar situation in March of 2017 when a fire tore through our county, and we lost our home and quite a bit of our livestock, and it was a bad time. And so we know what you're going through, and you are in our thoughts. I want to give you a few takeaways from our fire experience, and hopefully they will help you a little bit in what you're doing. By now, you're probably past burying animals, and you're to the point of evaluating what you have left and what you can do from here going forward. So a few tips from our experience and our takeaways were: one, let others lift you up. You are going to have a lot of people come through over the next few months offering help. And as a rancher, you're taught to be strong and independent and to take care of yourself, and you're supposed to be the one taking care of others. But sometimes you're put in a situation where you have to let others take care of you. So remember to sometimes you just got to let go and let others take care of you. Second takeaway is take care of your spouse and your kids. If you are still able to tuck your kids in bed tonight, you still have everything that matters. So as you are hurrying through, going in a million different directions, trying to take care of everything that needs to be done, at the end of the day, make sure that you're taking care of yourself, your spouse, and your kids. Right now, it probably seems pretty far-fetched when people say you might need to speak to a counselor and here's all these counseling options available. But in the end, your kids are going to need to talk to somebody. If they went through the fire, they don't know how to express necessarily to you or to others what they went through, but they're going to need to talk to somebody, and chances are you might need to as well. So when you might not need to do it right away, but make sure that you really do think through counseling options. You can do it online now and through Zoom so that nobody even knows you're there, but make sure that you keep that in the back of your mind, at least for your kids. Take a vacation. Our fire happened in March, and in September, we took a weekend and went and saw my sister and took the kids to do some fun things. And that was so good for our marriage, and it was good for our family. The next thing is taking care of insurance. If you lost your home, this will be, next to putting down animals, one of the hardest things that you have to do. And that is remembering in great detail everything that you lost. But the faster you do it, the faster you get it over with. So don't put it off. Just get it done and take care of it. And kind of the final takeaway is taking time for yourself. Whether it be taking 10 or 15 minutes at the start of your day to just stop, thank God for what you have left, and ask Him for the strength to keep going. If you aren't taking care of you and you're not taking care of your family, nothing else will line out. Those are kind of just a few of the quick takeaways that my sisters and I went over of things that were important to us. I think Dale and Brendan and some of the others there have our phone number. So if you need help with anything, just need somebody to listen because you're having a bad day, know that no matter how horrible it feels now, 4 years later, you will be in a better place, and this won't be as hard as it seems right now. You just got to make it through the next 6 months to a year. I want to leave you with some words from a Christmas devotional I was reading this morning. I don't think this was there by chance because it was so fitting for the message I want to leave you with today. So please bow your heads. God of love, we give you the grief we carry. God of hope, we pray for all we have lost. God of life, draw near to us when we suffer. God of peace, bless our hearts and homes today. Amen. Thank you for your time tonight, and know that all of us in Clark County are cheering you on and praying for you in these really tough months ahead.
Next on our agenda tonight is Deputy Secretary of the Kansas Department of Agriculture, Kelsey Olsen.
Good evening. I just wanted to touch on a couple things. You've heard it mentioned multiple times now, but there are a number of resources that are available to you. First and foremost, the Kansas resources that many of you have probably visited already. All of the information that you have in that packet is also available on the website, and you can access that website through agriculture.ks.gov. This information will be available and will be kept up to date as information changes and progresses. And the other piece that we want to talk about, you've heard it said tonight, Governor Kelly touched on it, Senator Mann touched on it, Ms. Clark touched on it, is mental health and taking care of yourself. One of the things that I noticed when I started this job is that there's a lot of stress in agriculture. I grew up on a farm. I have cattle myself now, and there's daily stress. But how do we handle and cope with that stress? A lot of us don't. Some of us think that we're coping better than we are, but when we blow up at our spouse or our kids, maybe we're not handling some of that daily stress as well as we think that we are. So I started looking myself, what resources are available out there? How do we go about getting support? I know that there is a lot of support out there and resources available, but it was difficult to find them. And how do you know what's a good resource? So the Kansas Department of Agriculture created a website, kansasagriculturestress.org, and that website pulls together the existing resources that are available at the state and national level for support of all family members, because as you've heard, it can affect children, it can affect a spouse, it can affect you personally. There's lots of resources out there that help address that. So please take time to visit those websites when you can. On the table, you have little stress balls. They have the website on them as well as little cards that are convenient. You can tuck it away in your pocket and look at it when you need to. It is a reference to the website. But one of the other important things on the Ag Stress page is service providers. So sometimes that seeking that help that you need is a little bit more than just relying on a conversation with a friend, and that's okay. Tonight, I want to introduce our next speaker, is with High Plains Mental Health. She is with a regional outlet here in the area that provides that additional support and resources to you. So our next speaker tonight is Kaylee Connor.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for being here, and thank you so much for allowing me to be here. My name is Kaylee Connor. I'm the manager of education and outreach at High Plains Mental Health Center. And I'm just going to be really honest. I don't pretend to understand everything you all have been through. I live in Russell County. Our thoughts, our prayers have been with our neighbors. The unthinkable happened 2 weeks ago, like someone else mentioned. And so we're here tonight to talk about, in light of everything else going on, you have so many things you're trying to take care of, but it's so important that we don't neglect to take care of ourselves and our families and our neighbors as we begin the process of recovering from this event that took place. The reality is we are all here in the same room, but this room is not the same for all of us. Some of us are here having just suffered a great loss, and some of us are here as friends, community, and members hoping to listen and to learn how we can help. So the fires, the storms, the damage, and the loss, by definition, is a significant trauma. What we experienced in our communities is something that is outside the realm of typical human daily experience, okay? And so that is defined as a critical incident. And following a critical incident, it is common to experience a wide range of emotional and physical reactions. And I have a list of some of the more common symptoms in your packet. I'm not going to review all of them necessarily with you because I want to skip ahead to ways that we can begin to manage the stress that we might be feeling in our families and in ourselves as a result of these experiences. So these are some tips that hopefully, to the extent possible, if you can implement some of these things into your daily routine, it might help kind of alleviate some of the heavy stress load that you're probably carrying right now. It's important to talk to others openly and honestly about your experiences and about how you're feeling. I call it venting. Venting can really help right now. If you can find that person that you trust, that you can be open and honest with, friends and neighbors, people who are here today to support. One of the most powerful things we can do is just to listen, to just be a good listener, to just be a shoulder to cry on. That can sometimes be very helpful. It's also important, to the extent possible, to take good care of our body. Physical health and mental health are so closely connected. So if we can try to eat healthy foods, if we can try to maybe get a little bit of exercise and physical activity, if we can try to get a decent amount of sleep every night or most nights, I'm sure that's not always going to be possible for you, but those three things are the big three that can really help alleviate stress in difficult circumstances. It's also important, to the extent possible, if you can make any time for leisure activities, for hobbies that you enjoy doing. It can be anything from, spending a few minutes out in nature, or spending time with a family member, grabbing coffee with a friend, connecting with your community. Any of those activities that are healthy, that you enjoy, that can help possibly relieve some of the stress, again, that you might be feeling. And, right now, I'm sure a lot of things in our lives feels completely out of our control. The wildfire, the storm, that was out of your control. There's a lot of routine things as farmers that you can't control, right? The weather, the market prices, all of those things. But in times of upheaval, when there's a lot of uncertainty, it can be very helpful to try to control the few things that you can control. Try to stick to some kind of routine to the extent that you can, so that there's some sense of predictability that can help ease some of the mental toll that you might be experiencing. And it's also worth noting, in the aftermath of a very difficult traumatic experience, to the extent possible, it's important to avoid turning to negative coping strategies, which could include drinking more alcohol, turning to drugs, even consuming too much caffeine, which seems harmless, but it can actually eventually add to the anxiety and make things worse. So it's important to find healthy ways to cope with the stress to the extent possible. And I also just want to say, mental health care is healthcare. Your brain is a part of your body, just like your heart or your lungs. And it is not a sign of weakness if you need to reach out and talk to a mental health specialist and get some professional support. Our motto at High Plains Mental Health Center is, we're here for you. And we really very much want to be here for you. We have full-time office in Osborne, which is probably the closest one to you, as well as Hayes. Telehealth services are available right now on Zoom, as was mentioned earlier. So that is a good option as well. We also have something called critical incident stress management services that are available to 8 communities within our service area at no cost. So if there's ever a need to have a therapist come in and just be available and just provide some trauma debriefing services for the community and for those affected, please call us in. We would be very happy to take that call and to work with you and to help to the extent that we can. We have 23 service locations in 20 counties. We have a 24/7 crisis hotline. That phone number is available 24/7, nights, weekends, holidays, anytime. That is a direct connection to a qualified mental health professional in the state of Kansas. High Plains, we also have a sliding fee scale. So help is not refused in the event of someone being uninsured or perhaps underinsured. And that is just a map of our service locations. Kansas Ag Stress that was mentioned earlier is another really good resource. We have at High Plains, we have several therapists and staff members who are directly involved in agriculture. So there is some understanding of the unique stressors and challenges that are often experienced in the agriculture industry. So I'm going to keep my remarks very short because I know you have a lot of other people you need to hear from tonight. But we will be here for the duration of the event, and even afterwards, we'll have some materials, resources set up outside in the hallway here. So please feel free to come by and see us, and do not hesitate to reach out if you need that support, because your health matters. So thank you very much.
Next, we're going to turn it over to our staff at the Farm Service Agency and Natural Resources Conservation Service to really dive into the disaster programs that are available. They've condensed a lot of their materials in order to not bring us here late into the night, but please do not hesitate to ask questions. That is the purpose of this meeting, is to make sure that those questions get answered. They will be speaking in the order that the packets that you have. So feel free to follow along. And if you need a packet, once we get started, please stand up and we'll make sure that we get extras handed out. First, I'd like to welcome up Todd Barrows with Farm Service Agency.
Good evening, everyone. My sympathy and empathy goes out to each and every one of you that lost something. This is a tragic event, and we're glad we're out here to be able to talk to you and have conversation with you, and hopefully give you some guidance on some program availability. I will tell you that I am a program division chief for Farm Programs Division with FSA in Kansas. In FSA, sometimes we don't necessarily talk about how long we worked for the agency. We talk about in terms of farm bills. This is my 7th farm bill, so I am been around a day or two. As most of you probably know, farm bills are every 5 years. This is home for me, my family, as I look across the audience. Not only from the standpoint that I see some very dear friends, some lifelong friends sitting in the audience that I know were devastated by the wildfires and loss, and also had some family members that had livestock in this loss. So it does hit home. And one more thing about my background before I get into it is I will tell you that I grew up in Ness County, Kansas, so I'm familiar roughly with this area. And I grew up on a diversified cow-calf operation on the back of a saddle horse. I'm proud of that. Please don't look too close to my foot attire, because you might be able to see some natural fertilizer still on the bottom of them, but I think I got most of it cleaned off before we came. My part in this, or my means in this, is to talk about the Livestock Indemnity Program, which covers death loss of livestock animals used for production agriculture. And then also I'm going to talk about ELAP, or Emergency Assistance Program, which is going to talk about hay losses, forage losses, and then additional forage purchases if we need to purchase that forage stuff in order to get those livestock, those grazing animals, through till the next available grazing season. So that's kind of what we're going to hit on. That's kind of my agenda. LIP, or Livestock Indemnity Program, it provides benefits to owners. And then we're going to, we'll talk a little bit about contract growers if we need to, but contract growers do not specifically qualify, or does not pertain to beef cattle producers. But when we talk about LIF, we're looking at the livestock deaths in excess of normal mortality. And then also we're looking at injured livestock that may have had been sold at a reduced price because of their injury. And so to provide additional compensation for those animals that were lost as well. And of course, it had to be losses caused by an eligible weather event, which naturally the wildfire and the excessive winds qualifies for that. There's quite a few slides here, so we're going to go through them rather quickly, but just want to point out that there's the main form that you're going to be working with is the 852. It's a two-part form, covers the notice of loss for the livestock indemnity program. That's the first part, and we'll talk about that specifically. And then we'll talk about the application for payment, which will be the follow-up to the notice of loss at a later date. The other thing you may get into, we'll talk about it, is 856 on how to come up with beginning inventory for if you have unweaned livestock or baby calves on the side of those mama cows that might have been lost due to death of the fire. And then also, at last resort, we do have the availability of a third-party certification. The most important part or factor, if I can't stress enough as we talk about tonight, is record keeping and being able to provide records. Now, if unfortunately you've had past experience with the livestock indemnity program, I do got good news for you tonight. And that is with the 2018 Farm Bill, Congress made some significant changes to the LIP program as far as documentation. So one thing that you won't really hear much from tonight is talking about verifiable, reliable records. Now you'll hear and you'll see in your slide packet, we talk about acceptable records. And when you hear acceptable records, we put the onus back on the local county committee and county committee boards to determine what will be acceptable. Now that we'll cover some slides on what are some acceptable types of records. But again, it's largely based upon the county committees now to determine what is acceptable or what is an acceptable record for the livestock indemnity program, which made it a lot easier to qualify for documentation purposes. The other thing I want you to just point out is you do have to maintain any type of record for 3 years following the calendar year in which the event occurred. So you would need to keep your records that you turn in to FSA up through the 2024 calendar year in case of some type of audit. Okay, sign up period. If there's anything fortunate about this fire is it happened at the end of the calendar year. And that means that the records, you're going to be processing everything in a relative short time frame, and therefore it's just bang, bang, bang. And I think that helps with the ease of it from the standpoint, your notice of loss, which is that first part, is parts A and B of the 852, has to be submitted within FSA within 30 calendar days of when the loss event occurred. Obviously, the loss event being the wildfire, December 15th, you need to have a notice of loss submitted with your local FSA office by January the 14th. The second part of that form, the 852, is the application for payment. And that portion of the form needs to be completed within 60 calendar days after the end of the calendar year for LIP. So since we're talking about 2021, then we have to have it done by March 1st of 2022. And we'll cover those parts in more detail. So first, let's talk about what are eligible and ineligible livestock. So eligible livestock in the LIP program must have been owned by an eligible livestock owner on or before the day the event occurred. And the animal died in that event. It also could be owned by an eligible livestock owner due to injury from that eligible livestock event or that eligible weather event, in this case being the wildfire. So we have the first bullet was due to death. This bullet is due to injury. And then again, they have to be produced and maintained for commercial purposes. In other words, they got to be in a business of producing ag product. Okay. Obviously, like I said earlier, LIP does cover for those animal deaths or animal mortality in excess of normal mortality. And we'll look at what is normal mortality for the state of Kansas. Your state committee with industry leadership from KLA, Farm Bureau, K-State Extension, come up with those normal mortality rates, and I have included them in the back of the slide packet for you. For injured animals, due to the eligible loss condition or the wildfire, on those animals, they had to been sold no later than 30 calendar days after the date of the event and have to be through a sale barn, slaughter facility, or rendering facility. So if an animal was rendered to the, or was injured due to the point that they're non-recoverable, broken legs, something like that, and they went to a slaughter facility or rendering facility, we will compensate for the cost on those, but this is the only time you would need to have verifiable records. And we'll talk about those verifiable records or sales receipts to one of those facilities. For eligible livestock to be considered under the LIP program, they must have died within 30 calendar days after the ending date of the disaster event. So within 30 days of that December 15th event, you know, like I said, and my boss is sitting here on the front row, so I got to be cautious about what I say. But you know, if it's within reasonable amount of that 30 days, I don't think we're going to question that too much because we all know how devastating that wildfire can be. Only animals that are alive or were born and alive prior to the loss event are eligible for the LIP program. And why we point that out, because obviously there was probably numerous pregnant or cows that were just getting ready to calving. And unfortunately, those unborn animals are not eligible for this type of program. They had to be a live animal and had reasonable expectation of living a normal life under reasonable considerations prior to the event to be eligible. I included all of the eligible animals under the LIP program. Obviously this slide deck is tailored just for the beef cattle because that was the main focus point of this meeting. But I did want to put in all the different types of animals that are eligible and understand they're you know, whether you could have had not only adult or non-adult beef cattle affected, could have been some equine animals affected, goats, sheep, swine, different things. These are the animals that would all be covered under the LIP program. We throw in there the definition of unweaned livestock. Of course, it makes just basic common sense. An animal that's not weaned from the mother's milk or some type of replacement nourishment is called unweaned livestock. Unweaned livestock death losses are considered non-adult for this program, and it's based on specific livestock kind, which would be the beef animal, type, weight range, and that will make more sense as we get back and look at the pricing and the values of compensation for those different animals, because that's how we break it down as far as different price levels based on weight, type, kind of that livestock death. And again, as I mentioned, they're expected to survive under normal conditions, and the death was directly caused by the weather event or in this case, the wildfire. This is just letting you know that on unweaned livestock, there would be two categories for beef animals that would be considered unweaned. That would be those that are less than 400 pounds and those that are 400 to 799 pounds. So we need to just briefly talk about ineligible livestock. And ineligible livestock would be those animals that are maintained for reasons other than for commercial use. And it lists some of those personal uses there. The thing is, the biggest one that I wanted to point out is that second bullet there. If it's an animal that was for consumption or for slaughter by owner for your own meat supply or meat food, those are ineligible for the LIP program. I'll back up here just a minute. The one that always gives us a problem, always comes up with ranch horses. As long as those horses or equine are being used on the ranch for gathering and working of livestock and stuff, if they are lost in the wildfire, they are definitely eligible. So even though you maybe use them at a roping on the weekend and stuff, if they're used on the range for the purpose of working cattle, they would be eligible. Obviously, we talked about this one. The second bullet there, stillborn livestock or unborn livestock are not eligible. But I want to focus there on that first bullet just a minute there as well. We have done this in the past in the 16 and 17 wildfires down in South Central Kansas. We're going to do it again. But if there are animals that had to be put down, they survived the fire, but they were injured to the point that they had to be put down as humanely as possible because of their struggle. By all means, we're going to go ahead and consider those animals as eligible livestock as if they would have died due to the fire. So just know that if you had to put down animals humanely as possible, we're going to go ahead and we're not going to question that. We're going to go ahead and consider those as damage or deaths due to the livestock or due to the wildfire. And then I went ahead and just included a list there of ineligible livestock. Of course, with the government, federal government, we got to throw in plenty of definitions because sometimes we define things differently than industry does. Commercial use, and you see the definition there. Operation or business activity engaged in the means of livelihood for profit. And then, of course, we define what a farming operation is. And again, it's a business enterprise engaged in producing agricultural products. And again, we just, it seems like in the government world, we got to repeat things about 3 or 4 times for it to sink in. So I just throw it in. Again, same thing, livestock made for commercial use, and there's a definition. So need to talk about, we've talked about eligible livestock. So now let's talk about who is an eligible livestock producer. And of course, for beef cattle, we're talking about the livestock owner of those animals. So they had to own the animals prior to the eligible loss condition or prior to the wildfire, and or the event, the wildfire that caused the livestock to either die or have injury. And then, so you had to have market risk, so that it's the person or the owner had to have market risk associated with the production of that livestock, or had legal ownership in the eligible livestock for which benefits are requested. And then here's our standard federal program definition for eligible producers. Has to be a U.S. citizen or a legal resident alien, be a partnership comprised of U.S. citizens or legal aliens, or some type of corporation, limited liability corporation, or a company organization established under state law. And I don't believe we need to cover anything with Indian tribal in this area. Again, eligible livestock owner meets the definition of livestock owner, which we just covered, and assumes the production and risk associated with production of that livestock. It's in the business of producing livestock for commercial use in the farming operation, and has legal ownership of that livestock prior to and during that weather event or that loss event. This is more for FSA purposes and than you all as a producer, but just so you're aware, you don't necessarily have to be associated on a farm record to in that county office in order to be eligible for this program, but we will have to load you in our what we call our producer or business partner database and associate you to the physical location county where your eligible livestock suffered that loss during that disaster event. So we'll have to get some basic data on you if you're not already in our system. Again, contract grower, wasn't planning on covering it. There's a few slides here. I left them in the slide deck just in case it affects somebody. But just so you know, contract growers on a LIP program is only applicable to any poultry or swine producers. So that we're just going to skip over in the essence of time those couple slides, but they are there if you are in that situation, or if you have a specific question, catch me after the meeting. I'll be sure to visit with you about that. So what is required documentation for the LIP? And again, as I mentioned, the big win out of the last farm bill was the ease of the record keeping for this program. And so you're not going to hear a lot about verifiable or reliable as you did in the past. You're going to hear about acceptable production records or acceptable records for death or injury. And then we also will need acceptable records for that beginning inventory so we can calculate your normal mortality. Of course, that proof or that acceptable record must come from you as a producer. Again, we need that for proof of death or injury. And again, it needs to be shown that it was lost due to the wildfire. Again, we're looking for records for normal mortality and then adverse death, loss, or injury. And then the final one there, we're also looking at beginning inventory. Some types of records that could be used as acceptable proof of death could be if you had any type of rendering truck receipts, if there's any type of veterinary records, documentation from a local vet, any type of private insurance documents, anything turned in as far as for a bank or loan or other loan documents that might, if you might have had a loan on that livestock. And then the big one here that we're allowed to use now that wasn't available in the past is this contemporaneous producer records existing at the time of the event. And I think, I don't know, I always refer Matt as a KLA Red Book as that contemporaneous record. I know a lot of producers also use a calendar, but would have the cow numbers and breeding records and data of calving and stuff. So that type of contemporaneous record can now be considered an acceptable record for eligibility under the LIP program. Obviously, pictures with a date are a great record. And then any type of herd improvement records, because I know personally that there are some producers in this area that have registrations or registered livestock herds, any type of registration papers from, or could be considered as herd improvement records and could also be used as an acceptable record. Again, keep in mind, this all goes back to the local county committee boards will have that determination on what is an acceptable record. Here's the only time that you're going to hear me talk about verifiable records. And again, this would be an event if you had injured livestock that was sold due to it was better to sell them than try to recover. And that would be through that third party, which we talked about, would have been through a sale barn, either a slaughterhouse or a rendering company. And in those cases, we would need a documentation receipt from that sales document with the weight, kind, type, and price received. Again, this is saying the same thing. Types of verifiable records or some type of sales receipt from that processing plant or that sale barn that you sold to. If there is no other documentation for death, we will allow for a third-party certification. This is kind of a last resort type thing. It may be used with acceptable beginning inventory. And this is when that CCC 854 form would come into play. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that in another slide. But here are some types of acceptable records for beginning inventory. And the one thing I want to point out is, it may include some type of pre-calving vaccination, whether you bought dosage of some type of vaccination that you gave shots to those mother cows prior to calving. You know, what I wanted to say is don't limit yourself. There's those type of veterinary records that could be used for a type of inventory for that beginning inventory record. Also could be some balance sheets that you may have with your farm operating loan, loan records, bank statements, farm credit balance sheets. I'll let you go ahead and look through those. But also, again, we can use that contemporaneous producer records existing at the time of the event, or that calving book or something like that as a documentation of beginning inventory. Inventory for unweaned livestock. Again, county committee may accept a combination of either the acceptable beginning inventory of the adult livestock, and then we'll run that through a means test, or we can also use some type of record for pregnancy check or ultrasound conducted by a third party. And when I talk about running that first one using the adult beef animal, running through a means test as far as calving, we look at a means test of reasonableness using a 90% calving rate for unweaned livestock. Hopefully we got other documentation that we can use that and don't have to use that means test, but it is available there as a last resort. Couple of flow charts. I'm not going to go through those, but one for livestock death loss required documentation kind of leads you through what we've been talking about step by step. And the other one is for injured livestock. So I'll let you look through those on your own so you can have them as a reference. Third-party certification. Again, the big thing here is this is only available when no other form of proof of death is available. Again, the producer is providing some type of record of death and beginning inventory, but then the specific details about how the third party has knowledge of the animal death or injury, that has to be documented on the 854, and also has to be documented that the third party must be an independent source, not affiliated with that farming and ranching operation. So it can't be an employee of that operation. So let's talk about the loss or the notice of loss. That first bullet there, livestock units, that's going to be assigned by FSA. So you don't have to worry about that, but you're going to have to file a notice of loss and then also the application for payment. So as I mentioned, the notice of loss on the 852 is parts A and B of that form, or that's the first two parts of the form. Again, it must be filed by livestock unit. And the big key thing is there, though, it only needs to be filed by one. If you have multiple producers owning that livestock, it only has to be provided or filed by one of the owners that has a share. Not all share owners have to file a notice of loss. Now, for an application for payment, again, these are submitted in the physical location county office where the animal suffered the loss. But for an application for payment, each producer has to file that application for payment. So you can have multiple applications of payment tied to one notice of loss. Again, as I stated at the beginning, the notice of loss has to be filed within 30 calendar days of the disaster event. So by January the 14th, again, only one producer with a share must file that notice of loss. And again, it's submitted in the county office where the physical location occurred for that disaster event. You do not have to file a notice of loss for normal mortality, but if you had normal mortality losses throughout the calendar year, you may want to provide a record of those losses to FSA so that the animals that died during the disaster event can be accounted for or receive benefits on. So it may behoove you to go back in your records for this past calendar year and pick up any losses by weight, kind, type and bring those in and call those normal mortality. You don't have to file a normal loss, a notice of loss on those. And that way, the ones that are the animals that lost under the wildfire event will be paid for or subsidized. You do not have to physically grace the doors of the local FSA office to file your notice of loss. We do allow that by alternative method, either by telephone, fax, or email. And if you do file your notice of loss by alternative method, it does not need to be signed. You don't have to sign it. Again, trying to be as easy as possible for this horrible situation. Now, parts D through J of 852 deal with the application for payment. Again, the application for payment needs to be filed within 60 calendar days of the end of the calendar year. So we're talking March 1 of 2022. And again, just to stress, each person with a share interest in that livestock death must file that application for payment. Obviously, there must be a notice of loss already on file. And I'll let you read through the other ones. Again, restating a separate automated application for payment for each producer with a share. Application for payments are based on a calendar year. So all these death losses, even though they may have died actually because we have 30 days from the disaster event, may have died in, hopefully not, but you may have animals that are still may die due to the disaster event into 2022. Hopefully that's not the case, but again, they would be covered under this 2021 application. When we talk about supporting documentation must be on file at the time the application is filed or the application for payment is filed in order to have a complete application. What we're talking about there is your documentation of acceptable records, either for beginning inventory and also for death loss or injury loss. I'll let you read through this on your own, but this is just the small print blown up on what you're certifying to when you sign off on that application for payment on that 852 for these injured livestock. And then also you're giving authorization to FSA to, at their discretion, to do a review of that application and verify information that may be provided. So let's get down to calculation of payment. When we're talking about payment rates, in case just for background information, these payment rates were established nationally. Everybody gets paid the same amount as far as that goes. As far as the payment rate, it's based on a 75% of fair market value of the livestock as determined by Commodity Credit Corporation based on the type, kind, and weight range of that animal. So here's what we're looking at. I threw this in here, like I said, for beef cattle, both adult and non-adult. And so it gives you an idea. You can plug in these payment rates per head on your numbers of loss and gives you an idea of what your payment would be. And again, keep in mind there's other eligible other than beef, and your local FSA offices would have that information available if you reach out to them. Same definition for contract growers as we did for livestock owners. And then the calculation is pretty simple. I mean, we're looking at your beginning inventory, minusing off your normal mortality, and then taking that times that payment rate based on type, kind, weight range, class of animal. That last bullet there is just on there in case there was some other type of federal funding for that death loss, some type of ad hoc disaster program, which at this point, nothing's been passed. And here are the normal mortality rates, as I said, that established by the Kansas State FSA Committee. Again, we reach out to industry leadership and partners in KLA, Farm Bureau, and others, K-State Extension, to come up with what these mortality rates should be. So these are coming from you as livestock producers from across the state. And again, we would have normal mortality for the other types of species as well if you get into that situation and need to file on something else besides beef animal. And then general payment information. These forms are most likely or probably already on file, but just keep in mind you'd have to have a 902 farm operating plan on file, 1026, which is your HEL sawbuster, swamp buster application, and 941, which is your AGI. And if you're familiar with farm programs, you should be pretty familiar with those other eligibility applications. So let's briefly talk about ELAP. Again, this is gonna be very quick because a lot of the information is the same as far as filing requirements. Again, eligible adverse weather event, you'll see excessive wind there is the third bullet, which we definitely had that. And then also wildfires on non-federally managed grazing lands. So in other words, wildfires on privately owned land. The two things I wanted to touch on here are eligible livestock for feed losses. And so anytime I get into ELAP and feed losses, where there's a means test. So that's why we're talking about eligible livestock to come up with that means testing on need for that feed. So when we look at our eligible livestock for feed losses, we're looking at the animals that would have been grazing or will be grazing and during the next grazing season that are on hand in your operation. It's not your beef animals that are going to your feedlot, but it's animals that would be beef cattle that would be on those grazing acres, either were or going to be in that next grazing season. Again, these would include animals that were owned, and they must have been owned 60 calendar days prior to the date of the eligible adverse weather event or 60 days prior to December 15th. And again, they must be part of your business operation used for commercial use of producing ag products. Again, ineligible livestock for feed losses include those livestock that are not maintained for a commercial purpose or used for consumption by the individual owner. So when we talk about livestock feed losses, that covers either purchased or harvested feed. So keep in mind it has to be harvested. I know the questions come up several times about, and we did this too on my own family farming operation. We saved back pastures for calving. Those got burned off in the wildfire. Those aren't covered because that grass was not harvested. This has to be actually mechanically harvested or purchased feed. And again, we're going to also provide additional subsidies for additional feed purchase above normal quantities required to maintain that eligible livestock until the next available grazing season. There is a national payment factor for feed losses, 60% or 90%. The difference there is the general population is 60% factor, 90% is for those producers that fall under the limited resource producer, beginning farmer rancher, socially disadvantaged producer, or veteran farmer. In coming up with a calculating a payment, again, we're going to look at the livestock producer's actual cost of the feed loss. And while it says there at that bottom bullet, I want to explain that just a minute. It says, you know, for fire damage or losses of feed due to fire, it's not to exceed 180 calendar days of feed cost for the eligible livestock. The key point there is it's not to exceed. So since the fire occurred on December 15th and our next normal grazing season is April the 15th, so basically we got 120 days of feed costs. And that factors in on coming up with that means test as far as the based on the cost to maintain that animal unit per day till that next available grazing season. And we use $1.04 per animal unit per head per day is what we're going to use on calculating that means. For any type of purchased livestock feed, of course, we would need a copy of the receipt of that purchase. So we see the cost, we'll date stamp and make a copy of that and return the original back to you so that you have that for your records. Acceptable records or acceptable documentation for purchased livestock includes receipts to be considered, must have the date of purchase, who you purchased it from, type and quantity of what was purchased, the cost, and then of course the signature of the vendor, if not licensed, so that we can verify that you in fact did purchase that feed by that third party. County committee will determine the value of the lost feed from purchased forage or feedstuff, and they're going to do that based on their knowledge. So I don't have a slide for this, but in a nutshell, how this works is, you know, you might have had 100 bales burn up in the fire. You're going to turn that into your county committee or to your local FSA office. They're going to assess a value of that hay based on the quality of that hay or the type of that hay it was on their own knowledge of the value of that hay. And then there's a means test of so if you don't need all that hay, you're going to get this, and that's where we're using your livestock numbers to come up with, and they'll figure out the cost of that using that $1.04 per animal unit per head to come up with the dollar value of what it maintains that animal till April the 15th. They'll take the smaller amount of your purchase hay cost or that means cost and then pay you a factor on that using that 60% or 90% payment factor. Now, the one part I didn't throw in there is they will, on your purchase feed, you are required to bring in any purchase receipts of what you purchased normally in the prior 2 years. We're going to average those together and subtract that off of what you purchased for this year. So it truly gets back to what you purchased above normal for that feed need for that livestock to maintain that livestock. Again, participant must provide verifiable, reliable records to the county committee satisfaction. And producer must provide evidence of either participant had the ability to produce the kind of an amount of forage or feedstuff claimed in the loss, or participant paid for production of forage or feedstuff before the loss occurred. And again, like I say, we talk about this 2 or 3 times just to in government world, just so it sinks in. And again, this is saying where the county committee will determine the value of that produced feed. You are eligible, again, for purchasing additional feed purchases outside the grazing period. And we are, you know, like say from December the 15th till April the 15th, we are outside that grazing period. So that's why we are talking about that. Participant must provide verifiable, reliable documentation as far as original receipts. And here's where I was talking about, you know, you had to provide your 2 years immediately preceding feed purchases, and then we'll subtract that from the average of those previous 2 years from your current year. So truly to see and pay for the amount that was on and above normal because of the fire condition. For livestock additional feed purchases, Again, the county committee will determine the value of additional feed purchases according to one ELAP. I'll let you read through those other two things. And then a couple last slides on noticeable loss under ELAP. ELAP is a little bit different in that the noticeable loss must be filed within 30 calendar days of when the loss is apparent. So again, we're looking at that January the 14th, but the application for payment then has to be filed by January the 30th. Now, with that being said, I want to explain that just a little bit. So the fee that burned up in the fire would have to be filed by January the 14th and January the 30th. For additional fee purchases, you may not be getting into that until the 2022 calendar year, February and March, and the grazing season, I said, didn't start till April 15th. Those purchases are still covered. They're under the 22 calendar year, but they're still under the 2021 notice of loss for the livestock feed additional purchases and due to the wildfire. So we'll still cover those additional purchases even though they may occur in the 2022 program year. That was a lot. It was a lot for me, and I work with this every day. So again, thank you for the opportunity to come and speak. I'll be around for questions. Steph? Yeah, I can. No, good point, Steph. So again, just so you know, all this information is available through your local FSA offices. And it's in the physical location where the loss occurred or where your administrative records are handled for your farming operation. And the one thing, and Steph brings up a good point that I want to cover is just so you're aware. So we're going over with this tonight with you all. We've already on immediately the day after the fire, we started putting out bullets and reminders for our field offices, getting them up to speed. We've had numerous communication with our sister agencies. So we're all talking about the same message, and we're going to go home, and next week we're training our staff and they're going to go through the same information that you're getting today, because we want to come away from this with one thing, and that is a clear centralized message, not only for FSA, but all our sister agencies within the federal programs. So it's not to try to alleviate some of that confusion. So you're hearing the same thing from every party involved, as well as from the federal standpoint. Again, I'll be around through the meeting. With that, I do need to sit down and give opportunities for others to speak. So
Thank you, Todd. Next, we'll invite up Josh Ritter to discuss FSA farm loan programs.
Good evening, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to be here and speak with y'all at this event. Now comes the tricky part. I have the clicker here and see if I'll be the first one to mess up trying to go through the slides. So I did it right. Yeah. The first couple slides I'm going to go through here just kind of give a brief overview of the local offices that service these areas. Farm loans is a little unique compared to farm programs in that we have 20 offices statewide that serve farm loans and our programs. So our Russell County office, they would serve the county here in Osborne. They serve Russell and Barton, Ellis, Lincoln, and Mitchell. And that's just some basic contact information for that office, including the name of the farm loan manager, who is Mark Herman. I'm sure some of you are familiar with Mark. And then I also wanted to highlight our Graham County office, which serves Rooks, Trigo, and then also Graham, Norton, Decatur, and Sheridan counties. And there's the contact information for that office, including the name of the farm loan manager, Randy Tile. And really my goal here today is just to give a real high level overview of the loan programs we offer at FSA, and then also give you that contact information. So moving forward, if you have time to process this, you can contact those local offices with questions and applications. So I'm going to talk about the loan options we have available, which are, I'm going to go through emergency loans, operating loans, or farm ownership loans, microloans, and guaranteed loans. First, in general, just some general loan eligibility items. We look at credit history as one of our main eligibility criteria. So you have to have an acceptable credit history to get a loan with our farm loan programs. We do test for credit, so that applies to our loans. So we don't compete with commercial lenders. So if we'll evaluate the financial strength of your application, and if we believe you can get a loan with a commercial lender, we'll send you that way. So you might also have to get a referral from a commercial lender for some of these loans in order to be eligible. And then the other basic thing I want to touch on is that you have to be the owner and operator of the farm or ranch for the loan you're applying for. Real briefly, I'm going to start with our emergency or EM loans. And these are made available by disaster designation. So right now, our agency is in the process of gathering the loss data for this disaster. And once that loss information is known, a request will be sent to our administrator for disaster designation. That is on a county-wide basis. So in order to be eligible, the county as a whole has to meet a certain percentage of loss. Sorry. Thank you. And so our EM loan funds can be used for both production and physical losses when applicable. Under this program, we can loan up to $500,000 based on loss calculations. The current interest rate for these loans is 3%, and the term is dependent on loss type. So if it's a shorter term loss to like a chattel asset, equipment or something, it'll be shorter term than if it's a building loss. The damage that we're loaning on must have been suffered because of the disaster, and any duplicative assistance will be used to repay the EM loan. So like Todd was just talking about ELAP and LIP, Carl's going to be coming up here and talking about ECP. If you get any of those funds, then we can't duplicate that, so that has to come back on that loan. Some of the losses we can cover would include livestock, equipment, stored crops, like hay and buildings, which isn't on here, but we can definitely cover any building loss too. Those loan funds can be used to repair or replace anything lost. In certain cases, we can also use our loans to refinance farm-related debt. And they can also be used for farm operating or living expenses if the losses we sustain were the calves or hay stock intended for resale. Kind of moving away from the emergency loan side, these are loans that we have available with for anybody that it doesn't take a disaster for you to be eligible for these loans. And the first one I want to touch on is our operating loan program. And under this program, we can loan up to $400,000. And our purposes could include purchase livestock and or equipment, to pay annual operating expenses, to refinance debt, and for minor real estate repairs or improvements that can be paid over 7 years. And right now, our current interest rate is 2%, and our loan term can be up to 7 years, depending on what the loan is for. We also have farm ownership or FO loans, and under this program, the loan amount is up to $600,000. And the purposes under this program include purchase farm or ranch real estate and repair or construct buildings or make capital improvements to any buildings that are essential to the farm operation. And right now, our current interest rate on these loans are 3%, and our loan term can be up to 40 years if needed for feasibility. We also have microloans available through FSA, and these are loan amounts that are $50,000 or less, and they can be used for any authorized OL or FO purposes. And kind of the bonus of these is it's a simpler application process, and we try to have a quicker turnaround because we get the information faster with these loans because it's less application. The interest rate would be the same as the current OL or FO rate. And the term can be 1 to 25 years, depending on security and loan type. And then we also have guaranteed loans that we insure for commercial lenders. So we can guarantee commercial loans for authorized purposes up to $1,825,000. And when that happens, the bank will come to us for the guarantee, and we can guarantee that loan up to 95% of any loss they would sustain on that loan. And this incentivizes lenders to make loans they otherwise may not make due to tight repayment capacity margins, limited security, and other credit concerns. Like I said, I'm trying to keep this pretty brief. So if you need more information, you can contact your local office. And if they don't have an FLP presence, they can get you in contact with the office that covers that area. And there, I also put a website link up here that you can go to get more information on farm loan programs. And a couple items in your packet too. There's a couple fact sheets about farm loan programs. And then this is a contact information map that shows where all our 20 offices are located, what counties they cover, and who you can contact if you're interested in loans in that area. Like Todd said, we'll stick around for a while afterwards. So if you have any questions at that time, feel free to come talk to us. I just want to thank you all for the time of getting to talk to you, and really wish you the best as you guys continue to regroup and rebuild from this disaster. So thanks for your time.
Thank you, Josh. Next, we'll bring up Carla Wyckoff to talk about the Emergency Conservation Program.
All right. Good evening. I tend to talk softly, so wave your arm if you can't hear me. I'm Carla Wyckoff with the Farm Service Agency. I work in the Conservation Price Support and Emergency Conservation Program area in the state office. So work with all the county offices to help implement those programs. I want to provide you with my sincere concern for you and working through this process. And we hope that what the information that we're providing you will help you in the recovery process. So ECP, Emergency Conservation Program, it's a program that we implement in cases where there's been a natural disaster. And ag producers need assistance in order to bring their land back into pre-disaster condition. One of the things that's required with that is that the work that's done on that land to do that recovery, we're required to follow NRCS standards and specs in order to be able to cost share with producers on the payments. So just to give you a little background to how ECP works, it's a program that's not active continually. It just happens when there is some type of natural disaster in the area. So just give you a little background of how that process works, because it does take a little bit to get up and get rolling. The county committees and the county emergency boards, they make an overall initial assessment of the damage to start with. And then the county executive director completes what we call a loss assessment report. Then the county committee makes a determination to see if ECP is warranted based on the needs of the community. And that can be one person in the community that needs that, they can implement that ECP. Once they have determined that the ECP is warranted, then the county committee sends that all the documentation and information to the state office. That goes on to the national office, and they're the ones that make the final determination of implementing the program. So once the national program manager makes the decision, approves us to implement ECP in a county, then the county committee sets up a sign-up period. And counties then will begin informing and educating producers on how this program works and what they need in order to get cost share through this program. So just to let you know at this point, we have received your county offices, service centers have already gone to work to pull this request together. We've already received requests from Rooks, Russell, Osborne, Ellis, Graham, Trigo, and Wichita County, which is a little farther away from you guys. So they have done their part at this point to start working on this program. We are waiting on the national office to determine, to give their approval for us to implement the program. So that's where we're at with that right now. One thing to note in here is before a ECP application is approved, there is no guarantee of payment. So we have to go through the whole process in order for the payments to be funded and be able to do that. One of the things that they have to look at before that approval is done is going through the environmental and cultural resource review prior to approval. So person eligibility. So any person that has any type of event, natural disaster event, it's determined on an individual basis when the producer comes in and makes their application, and they must not be able to install or repair that without assistance or without it causing a financial hardship to the producer. You do have to be an ag producer that contributes to the cost of the practice, and you have to have an interest in the farm, such as being an owner, tenant, landlord, or sharecropper. So land eligibility is land that's physically located in a county that's been approved for ECP. It's privately owned and normally used for farming. It can be a grazing, commercial livestock operation, or producing ag commodities, or commercially producing orchards or groves. Ineligible ground would be any federal, state owned or controlled land, or any losses due to being located in a greenhouse, a hoop house, or a high tunnel structure, or any devoted trees for timber production. They do not fall within this, eligible for this program. So some of the ECP practices that we implement are replacing and restoring permanent fences, restoring conservation structures and other installations, field windbreaks, and farmstead shelter belts. So permanent fences, just a couple of highlights there. It would apply on farmland where permanent fences are used for ag purposes and they were destroyed or seriously damaged by the approved disaster. Materials and design must restore the fence to a similar type and function that existed before the natural disaster, and the practice had to be functioning prior to the disaster. Fence replacement and restoration must conform to current NRCS standards and specs. So as Todd said, we keep repeating ourselves through some of these things. So that's one of the requirements for getting cost share from us, is meeting the NRCS standards and specs. These practices do have lifespans, so they want you to maintain those practices that they're cost sharing with you on. And just an example would be for fencing, it's a 20-year time period that's a lifespan for that practice that it'd have to be maintained. So for permanent fences, if you're restoring that, then cost share would be authorized for fence to return the land to productive ag use. any livestock inclusion, wildlife exclusion to protect a crop, cross fences, boundary fences, cattle gates, and any solar or wind-based power sources if it is determined to be less costly than electric fence. So with the last farm bill, they added an extra option under the fencing cost share, where you can request a cost share advance payment to help pay for any expenditures that you need for that fencing ahead of time. At the time you make your application, when you go to the service center, you need to make that request at that time. And you can request 25% of the total cost share available for that fencing. And one of the requirements with receiving that advance payment is that you use that money for your expenditures within 60 days. You have to provide a receipt to the county office to show that you've spent that money, that you've gotten that 25%. So that's really important on there, is that advance that you're taking, you need to spend that within 60 days of the receipt of the advance. So when you receive that money. So another option is restoring conservation structures. It's those used for ag purposes, and they must be built to the Nrcs standards and specs. Cost share components in this area would be solar units for livestock damaged by wildfire, livestock water facilities when damaged by wildfire, or permanent cover when needed in conjunction with eligible structures used to prevent critical erosion. Another option under ECP is for field windbreaks and farmstead shelter belts. So once again, if they're destroyed or seriously damaged by the fire, within the field windbreak and farmstead shelter belt program includes any debris removal, tree purchase, planting, weed control. For this, it is a 15-year lifespan that you're required to maintain that. And once again, it must be built and restored at Nrcs standards and specs. So what I need to do to make an application, visit your service center that maintains your farm records and complete the FSA 848 form, which is a cost share request. We did provide that in your packet just as an example, so you can see the information that the service center is going to be asking you to fill out on that form and sign to make a request. You do need to include all producers that might be sharing in the cost of the practice. They need to be included on that application. And it always helps to have photos and any record of the damage that you have that will help through that application process. There are eligibility forms that you have to fill out with ECP. The AD 1026, if you're already a producer in a county and you're already getting payments from there, you've already probably filled out these forms. There's also the 902 and the 901, if applicable, that would be included in that requirement for getting the payments on this program. There's also the CCC 860. Todd mentioned it just a little bit. It's a form that's used for socially disadvantaged, limited resource, beginning and veteran farmer or rancher certification. So if that applies in that situation, one of the reasons for that within this cost share program is that instead of it being a 75% cost share as it normally is for ECP, you would get 90% of your cost share on that if you have an approved CCC 860 form. If that's applicable to you, then be sure and take advantage of that. So we go through the process, we approve the application, you do the work out there, and then you have to, once that's complete, you have to report the performance of the practice. This is another page of the FSA 848. The service center will provide that information to you so that you can complete that. And that has to be done before a practice expiration date. You also have to provide your documentation of what your costs were for completing the fence replacement, and those are invoices, canceled checks, paid receipts. That documentation must show the ECP applicants paid for the cost of the practice before they receive that cost share. It's also important to note that all participants that shared in the cost of the practice are included on those invoices. So if you're sharing with if owners and operators are sharing on the costs of the fence, or however that share might be, their names need to be on that documentation that you're providing. The payment limitation has been moved up to 500,000 for ECP payments. So that's the maximum payment each person or any entity can receive in cost share payments. So just a list there of the documentation. If you're providing your own labor and your own equipment for the fencing, things that you need to provide are listed there that have to be provided on your documentation when you provide that. An on-site visit will be performed once the completion of the practice is done, and once again must meet the NRCS standards and specs of that practice before we can pay cost share. Payments, as I mentioned before, are paid on 75% of a rate. They have changed this procedure from several years ago when we implemented ECP since then, but not on a wide range like we're doing now. But they are now using what they call payment scenarios. And so it's just a flat rate that you're paid. So there's a rate we pay by foot on fencing, and there's a rate that's set for that, and then you get 75% of that rate. You do still have to provide all your documentation before you can get paid, but that documentation doesn't make a difference in what you're actually paid in the end. It's based on this set flat rate for those payments. And as I said before, if you've completed a CCC 860, then your cost share rate will be at the 90% level instead of 75%. There is a stipulation within ECP that we cannot pay, cost share payment can't exceed 50% of the ag market value of the affected land. So that's one of the limitations with ECP. Your county committee set that ag market value, and we can't pay you cost share over 50% of that. That's one of the limitations. So as I said before, the limitation's 500,000. It's done based on direct attribution. So that is per person per disaster event. As always, subject to eligibility and availability of funds. And the last statement on there on the minimum qualifying restoration is that they do not approve cost share requests for less than $1,000 per participant, unless you're a limited resource producer, which is that 860 form. Then it would be anything 250 or below, we wouldn't cost share. This is just some information included in your packet to show what the definition of each one of those items are for the CCC 860 form for limited resource producers, socially disadvantaged producers, and beginning farmers. This is just a quick example of how we would pay cost share for ECP. If we had a husband and wife joint venture, they own and operate 500 acres of grass. 4 miles of the fence was destroyed by fire. 4 miles were completed, and all the documentation was provided to the county office. So our computation would be based on that cost share rate. This is a real rate, $2.14 a foot. It's the 2021 rate that they had set. And that's taken times that 75%. So it'd be $1.61 a foot. So 4 miles would be a cost share of $34,003. And then that would be divided 50-50 between the husband and wife. Once again, just a reminder that both the husband and wife's names have to be on the application and on the cost documentation in order to get that cost share. Another item that I provided in the packet, besides it's an 848 form, which is the application request form that you would fill out in the county office. They'll help you with the service center. They'll help you fill that out. And then I also provided a listing of information just to add to the approval of the ECP application. And I'm not going to read all of that to you. It's just to help you. It's in your packet and you have that information there to help you with the application process. So with that, I would like, is there any service center employees here for FSA? I'd like them to stand up so you can see who you're going to be working with in these areas.
Thank you, Carla. Next, with the Natural Resources Conservation Service, Dean Crable is going to talk about those technical fence standards for that program and grass recovery.
All right, good evening. Been here for a while, a lot of information being transferred to you. All the information I'm going to talk about, of course, in the presentations. The most important thing you need to gravitate towards is reach out to your local service centers, your NRCS folks, right? So we have a standard specification for all those things that Carla mentioned: fence, windbreaks, watering facilities, etc. So they're going to be your best resource to be able to design anything to help you through the process to acquire or access ECP, if you will. So again, I'm Dean Crable, State Resource Conservationist for USDA NRCS in Kansas, lifelong Kansas, born and bred down in Scott County, if you will. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Certainly hearts go out to you guys and what you're experiencing. And so what we'll talk about today is going to be pretty bare bones. I'm not going to go through all the details of how to build a fence. That's not what we're here to talk about. So again, that conversation is best going to be had with your local service center. So everything we have for standard and specification, and you want to focus on the specification, right? So the standard is what's developed nationally. We don't revise that much. We actually dig into how that practice applies in the specification, right? And so you're going to find all of this information. It's publicly available. You can go to our field office technical guide. It's what our field staff uses to help you design, in this instance, a fence, right? And so you're going to look at the 2014 fence standard and specification, right? That's the current date we have on that. So the information in there is what you want to use. You don't want to use Nebraska's, Missouri's, Colorado's, Oklahoma's, or anybody else's. You want to use a Kansas specification. Because that's what that fence payment is based off of, that Carla mentioned, right, is how we apply it in the state of Kansas. So again, just some real basic information, right? So think about, we have pole assemblies, we have corners, we have wires, we have posts, right? Fences are pretty basic when it comes to construction. So the specification we have is long-term proven. The materials that we have have been around for a long time. They work really well. We haven't modified it for quite a while. So if you will, think about so let's talk about the wire first. 12.5 gauge wire, right? That's going to be your woven wire for barbed wire fence, right? That's going to be the wire you're going to be after, again, for ECP or for Ecp if you're looking at, future fences down the road to cross fence, improve that, whatever the case may be. This gives you some information on installation of the wire, how to, again, the type of material you need in order to attach it to the post. the height of it, all the information again as a narrative as it's described in the fence specification. You're going to want to look to the tables towards the end of this, but I'll get to those here in just a little bit. Again, attaching the wire to the line post, you're going to use staples for wood posts, the clips, if you will, for the woven wire fence. Again, it's pretty straightforward with what's there. And I apologize for the size of the print on this. Couldn't get all of it very well managed, but let's move into the posts, right? So wood posts, pretty straightforward. They need to be new, right? If we're going to put out pay for a post, let's make sure that it's new, it's free from decay. It needs to be a sound post, right? And there's some dimensions associated with that in the following tables. Steel pipe posts, for those that are interested in using, maybe transitioning from wood post to steel, probably a smart idea. If you have any inclination of using fire down the road or seeing fire again. Steel, we saw a lot of steel go in both previous wildfires, right? So you want to make sure you understand what type of post, a nominal size or outside dimension posts that are required for this, for again, the life of the post, to make sure that it has the ability to stay there. Used materials can be used for steel pipe, right? But it needs to be free from decay. It needs to be able to stand up to the time, if you will. T-posts, right? So we require 1.33 pounds per foot T-posts, right? Not the traditional easy or lightweight post might be 1.25 pounds. So be sure you use the 1.33 pounds per foot T-post if you're gonna use the metal T-posts. Again, there's some more specifications on using concrete and whatnot associated with steel and pipe posts for corners and brace assemblies. So again, it's information there. It's definitely want to work with your service center, make sure you know how often you want to put those pull assemblies and those brace assemblies and whatnot. Let's talk about the bracing just a little bit. So again, most of the time we have three post corner brace assemblies, right? So you think about 2H braces put together, but they're in the form of a corner assembly. So again, we have some specifications of what those brace assemblies look like, what those cross members look like, what they should be comprised of. Really important information is the alignment of it, the degree of angle, if you will. There's a lot of information here you want to pay close attention to, so you get it right. If you're going to be trying to do this on your own, which again, I would not encourage you to do that. Get the assistance from your field staff. Again, more information on bracing information. Everything that's highlighted in here is really important. I'll say that because the fencing specification that you're looking at in front of you covers everything from 3-wire energized fence to woven wire for sheep, goats, cattle, llamas, you name it, right? So the highlighted information in here is what you're going to really need to understand for barbed wire fence, right? Which is predominantly what you're going to be installing. So again, just more information on bracing. I'd encourage you to read through that, so you kind of memorize it. So now this is the nuts and bolts of our specification, right? Is in the tables. So this talks about, like, for cattle, for standard barbed wire fence. Most of you probably be going back with a 4-wire fence, right? Maybe 5 if that's what you think you need. This has average heights of the top wire and the cross member. Maximum line post spacing between the stays, right? So if you think about 4-wire barbed wire fence, you can go up to 20 feet. A lot of folks go with a rod, 16.5 foot. Again, that's your choice, but you're going to be paying a little bit more out of pocket for the more T-posts or wood posts you put in the ground. So again, the payment rate is based off this information you're seeing here in front of you, right? So again, these tables are going to be really important to navigate to real quickly, to better understand if you're going to be ordering material. This is what you're going to want to grab. So right here again, here's a reference to the 12.5 gauge double-stranded barbed wire fence. It has some, requires galvanization, meets an ASTM, if you will. But most of your 12.5 gauge wire that I've seen out there on the market is going to meet our standard, right? So just verify that before you invest a lot, because as much fence as you have to replace, there's going to be a huge investment. We understand that. Again, just to repeat, again, standard steel T-posts. Again, the 1.33 pounds per foot of length. Talks about depth of, the height of the post, or the length of the post, as well as how far you need to drive into the ground. Again, just basic information you're going to need to know for that T-post if that's what you're going to use. Some folks have opted for steel pipe, in place of like the wood post for every third or fourth post or something of that nature. Again, there's information in here if that's what you're after. Again, table 4 really looks at that, again, that brace assembly, right? So for corners, corner brace assemblies, ends, gates, inline pull assemblies, right? You're going to want an inline pull assembly about every quarter mile, again, depending on terrain. And some of the terrain out, a little bit further west, it's within the burn scar, you're going to maybe want those a little bit more often. So again, this gives you the minimum diameters of that. I would note in our previous experience and previous wildfires that, traditional steel pipe that might be coming from oil field, right, may not meet that minimum size requirement. So you need to refer to the nominal size, not the outside diameter. 3-inch nominal pipe, right, is 3.5-inch outside diameter, right? So a 2 7/8 oil field pipe does not meet this standard. So keep that in mind. So again, some more information on brace member types, if you will. So you've got wood, minimum diameter on the brace assemblies, steel round pipes as well, 1.5 inches. Again, you're thinking about that horizontal compression member, right? So again, just some pretty basic information. Please reach out to your local field staff and have that conversation with them. There is a meeting set for January 3rd in Paradise at the Methodist Church at 11 o'clock for contractors, landowners, producers. If you're going to be building a fence, that would be the place you'd want to go to. And so I'll ask real quick. So for the Nrcs field staff, if you're here, a couple of you, if you'd stand up, wave your arms. Steve, Ray, come on, Ray, stand up. Stand up, Ray. Thank you. A couple of the folks you want to get to be pretty familiar with, right? That's your best local resource. Again, so this meeting, January 3rd, 11 o'clock, Paradise Methodist Church. Landowners, producers, and contractors are going to build fence. So the next item, I want to talk a little bit about grassland and wildfire recovery. And so fortunately, unfortunately, we've had some experience dealing with that since 2016, even prior to that. You folks have seen it up here, maybe in smaller scale than what you've recently seen, right? And so the one thing we know about grass and fires, right, they're extremely compatible. When you burn grass, it has a response. It responds to that pretty quickly, typically. The rough part about this is this happened in December, not in March and April, right? And so that grass is going to recover a little bit different. So we've got some resources here for you to think about that. But that grass will recover. You've seen it before. If you've seen fire around, the folks that have talked about the Anderson Creek and Starbuck fire, grass is extremely resilient and it comes back. So let's talk about management considerations just real quick. When it comes to how do you manage your pastures, right, that have been partially burned in this wildfire or maybe wholly burned, right? So if they've only been partially burned, again, just a consideration, if you can apply a prescribed fire in that remaining unburned portion to keep the cattle from continually overgrazing what's green and growing, what did get burned, right? Something to think about. Think about the stocking rates, right? What have you historically used? We'll have some other information here coming online relatively soon that gives you some ideas of what those stocking rates might be, right? Just something to consider. Avoid using the same areas and plants at the same time each year, right? So if you think about cross fencing and rotational grazing, don't come back to that same spot every year, right? So don't start in the same paddock, if you will. Something to think about. Certainly, if you have other resources available to take some of the pressure off of that grass that's been that experienced a wildfire. So again, rotational. If you haven't utilized rotational grazing, it certainly can be something to think about. Again, to take pressure off of the burned areas. Also allows grass to recover, right, and respond, rest, if you will. You can also think about rotating your salt, mineral, and feeding areas to better distribute grazing across your pastures. If you had a cross fence, right, think about, was it in the right place? right? Did it work in your management system? And if not, right, then you can open up that door with the NRCS staff and they can help you maybe think about different locations. And monitor, right? So in the case of a drought, right, grass does grow. It just doesn't grow as well, especially after a wildfire. Monitoring what that grass does, how your cattle are performing, right? The best indicators of good grass is cattle performance, right? So here's some other information just to think about when it comes to wildfire recovery. There's some really good information in Kansas State University, Oklahoma State University when it comes to post-fire events and how grass responds, right? So sometimes it's worthwhile to think about reducing your numbers if you can do that, or maybe offset the amount of the time that they're in those pastures. So here's just some more information. Again, Keith Harmony did some work out of Hayes here, looking at production versus precipitation. Again, just some resources for you to have available. There's a link there, and I think this information is going to be available online, so you'll be able to click to that, or you can certainly type in that URL and navigate some of that information from Keith Harmony and Kansas State University. So another study, just real quick, that Harmony did, he monitored some of the results in a wildfire in Northeast Ellis County, right, not that far away, in 2017. And so looking at, years prior to that, looking at forage production and other yields, pound of yield per acre, 2016, 15 and 16, you saw a stark decrease right in 2017. So again, forage produced post wildfire decreased that 2017. The good news is it came back, right? In the second year following fire and third year following fire. You can see those averages showing up there. Again, just resources that make you think a little bit about your stocking rates and what your grass and performance and cattle performance might be able to handle. Some other things to consider. Again, this is from experience, right? Those weeds that you're going to see emerge right in probably February, March, April timeframe. Those are forbs, right? They'll diminish over time with fire, after the fire. You may not need to spray those, right? Unless they're noxious and invasive plants. That grass will recover. Again, that's nature's way of healing over. An immediate burn scar is producing, some kind of forage or a plant material or herbaceous material out there that can cover the landscape. Be careful when you're feeding hay. Think about where it came from, right? You don't want to introduce Serratia lespedeza or Old World Blue Stem or something that's going to be problematic for you. Cattle aren't going to eat, or you're going to have to worry about when it comes to noxious invasive plants. And then the last item there is just think about any trees that are left out there, post wildfire. Cattle don't eat trees, right? So can you take them off the landscape? What can you do with them? Get them out of the way and let that grass recover even more fully. So with that, I think I'm going to turn the mic over to Joel Wilhoff. He's going to talk about some other conservation opportunities for you all. This slide here just has some of those resources and links for you to access some of the information that comes from Kansas Department of Ag, Kansas Research, K-State Research and Extension, and Oklahoma State University. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Joel Wilhoff. I am the Environmental Quality Incentives Program Manager for Kansas Nrcs. I have had the opportunity to work for Nrcs for almost 39 years now. And in that 39 years, I have been involved with a few disaster situations such as occurred here in the last couple of weeks, and nothing has hit me as hard as this because it's close to home. I live in Hayes. I was the district conservationist in Hayes for approximately 10 years back in the late 90s. So you certainly have my deepest sympathy. Tonight, I wanted to talk to you about some opportunities for financial assistance through the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, Ecp for short. particularly about emergency animal mortality management, financial, excuse me, financial assistance. So many are facing livestock disposal needs due to the recent wildfire events. And just want to let you know that you can apply to receive Ecp financial assistance and technical assistance for Practice 368 Emergency Animal Mortality Management. But you need to make an application at our local field offices. So I do want to mention you do not have to go into the office. It was probably more expedient to do that, but you can contact our field office staff by telephone or through emails and in order to make an application. So applications need to be submitted by January 14th. And these are applications for a contract, and contracts will be obligated as prudently and as expedited as possible. We want to get producers who have been affected by animal losses and disposal needs. We want to get money in your pockets as soon as we can. So a little bit about Ecp. Ecp's the same game it's always been. You have to be an eligible participant. So with that, there are some records that need to be established with the Farm Service Agency. One of those, of course, and Todd talked about that earlier, is Form AD 1026, the HEL Highly Erodible Lands Conservation Certification that needs to be done annually by producers. Another form that needs to be provided is the CCC 941 Average Adjusted Gross Income Certification. And then, of course, the CCC 902 Farm Operating Plan. Thank you. I appreciate that. I know that this meeting has been just a little bit long, but I want to emphasize that the agencies here that have provided information are really care, and we do want to make a relevant impact on your recovery. So if you would just give me a few minutes, I will try to get the information out to you that you need for animal mortality recovery. So other documentation that's going to be needed is control land documentation. The word control means possession of the land by ownership, lease, or other agreement. We'll need the application form signed, which is a CPA 1200. That can be done in the office or through email or by farmers.gov if you're signed up in that venue. We will need a written request to start and complete the emergency animal mortality management practice before the contract is obligated. I know many of you have already taken care of those needs, but we will provide a waiver for that practice to be eligible under the contract, even though it was started before the contract was awarded. We'll also need standard form 1199A, which is a direct deposit form. All that information has to be put into our contracting system and then verified before contracts excuse me, can be let. So a little bit about payments. The only conservation practice available under our disaster relief program is animal mortality management. So there'll be a one-time payment made for two different practice scenarios. One will be for emergency disposal or at the landfill or a rendering plant. We'll need some information about that so we can design the practice, but we'll need the name and location of the rendering facility or landfill, weight of animals delivered, scale tickets, some of the same information that FAA is going to request for some of their programs would be sufficient. Dates, animals removed, owner operator certification stating information is provided is accurate to the best of their knowledge. Another payment scenario is for emergency burial. And we'll need some information about the location of those burial sites, approximate dimensions of the burial pits, the date of burial, animal units and animal weights of animals buried, and then owner operator certification stating that the information provided is accurate. As with FSA, anything that we provide financial assistance for through Farm Bill programs, of course, has to meet NRCS standards and specifications. Emergency animal mortality management is one of those practices where I don't believe those standards and specs will be too hard or harsh to meet. So it is a relevant opportunity for you. Don't let it go by. Stop by our offices and take advantage of the Ecp disaster assistance that we're providing for emergency management or emergency animal mortality management. I do want to make a couple of other opportunities known to you regarding the Ecp program. For those of you that have had Ecp contracts in the past or currently have an Ecp contract where one of the practices was destroyed by the fire and you had received payment for that practices, we can make reapplication of that practice and provide financial assistance for that as well. So again, you need to talk to our field office staff about that, but an Ecp application for a new contract is necessary if the reapplication of the failed practices are from an expired contract. If it is a failed practice in a current contract that has not expired, we will simply modify that contract for that reapplication. Again, talking with your local DC is key to being able to receive this type of assistance. So with that, that concludes my presentation. I appreciate your attention. And again, we do at NRCS want to be relevant in your recovery.
As we, before we wrap up, I want to take a minute to thank the Kansas Department of Agriculture, the High Plains Mental Health Center, Natural Resources Conservation Service, and FSA. Last week, right before Christmas, all of us got together and decided that we needed to have a meeting, and within a couple hours, all of those people confirmed and got their presentations ready that they could be here today. So let's give them a round of applause. As we wrap up, I want to invite Heather Lyle and Matt Teagarden before we finish up to come speak about our two disaster relief fund applications.
Good evening. I know it's been kind of a long evening for everyone, but if you'll lend me just a few minutes. I'm the treasurer of the Paradise United Methodist Church, and we were contacted right away that people had started donating money on behalf of all those affected, and we immediately opened an account with Southwind Bank to start putting the fire relief funds in. They are available to anyone in the 5 counties that were affected. There was a little bit in Trigo as well. So the 5 counties would be Ellis, Brooks, Russell, Osborne, and Trigo from the fires that happened on 12/15. There is an application. There's actually 2 of them. And depending on what you lost, you would be eligible to fill out one of them or both. If you have any questions, please call me. The number are on these. So they're in the very back of your forms that you got tonight, or if there are people that are missing, please give them my number. They can call me at my office here at Angel and Cook. It is 785-885-4444. The one application is just for those who lost their house, and it was their primary residence. It's the residential dwelling application. The second application is for producers and also landowners. We did have 3 residences that were rentals. So if you're the owner of that rental, this would be the application for you to fill out. In addition, these funds will be based, the amounts given will be based off the amounts coming in. So we will leave the fund open as long as possible, but in order to help give relief timely, we need these turned back in, please. They have to be turned back in by February 18th is our deadline. So that gives you several weeks. You're working on taxes anyway, to kind of get your information together and submit it at the same time. And the mailing PO box is here, or just come down to Angel and Cook where I'm at and you can drop them off. A couple of organizational questions have been asked. We are mimicking very closely to what Ashland Foundation did with their disbursements. So all the homeowners that was all displaced people whose house burnt down received an initial check already. If you know someone that we missed, they need to call me because I will give them a dispersal check, please. We had 26 checks that I wrote last week. If anyone was missing, we want you to be included. So please call me. And then secondly, we will use the same system that Ashland used to figure your eligibility after you turn in your applications. So please be patient with us while we process them. It is going to be, it's a board appointed from a professional institution, 5 people that will be implementing all of this. So it's very confidential. Please fill out the information because we want, and people want, all these donations have come from local people, organizations, churches, other foundations. They want to help you. So just please fill this out, get it back to us, and we will get you what we can through the donations that have been made possible. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that. So to build on that, the Kansas Livestock Foundation is accepting contributions that will be focused on livestock producers. So I really appreciate the local folks here supporting homeowners and those folks that have those losses. The Kansas Livestock Foundation funds will focus on livestock producers. The application is in the packet. We also brought some standalone pages. So if you need another copy, you can find it somewhere in the back or outside on the tables. That'll also be on our website, on the Kansas Department of Agriculture website as well. So a number of places you can look there. We ask for some information to try to determine the impact. So miles of fence, number of livestock lost, some outbuilding questions. Try to get the detail that we think will provide for equitable distribution of the funds, but not make it so onerous that it takes you a day and a half to fill that out. So these funds will be available to producers from across the state that were impacted by the severe weather, the fires and wind on December 15th. It's not limited to this area. So folks that from outside the 4-county area that are here or on Zoom, let me make clear this is available to all Kansas producers. It isn't reliant on KLA membership or anything like that. If you suffered a loss due to the weather on the 15th of December, you're eligible. Fill out this application and get it submitted. The funds, 100% of the funds that are received by the foundation will be distributed, and there will be a committee of producers that will determine a formula to equitably distribute those funds. There's some information, address and phone number there. The other piece I want to highlight is if you are in need of hay, feed, I know everybody needs fencing supplies, that's in short supply, but if you're in need of materials, please let us know at the KLA office. There's other folks that are doing a great job of coordinating assistance. We want to help with that too. And so we want to make sure your name is on our list when we have hay available. We can send trucks directly to your ranch. So if you're in need of hay in particular, other feed materials, let us know and we'll add you to the list. We are also keeping track of offers of contributions of those materials. And so we'll match those up. So if you haven't talked to any of our team, please let us know and we'll get help directed your way. Want to take a minute to make sure you all know our team that's here. Dean Clare is our director of our stock growers division. He's helped put this meeting together. And then Jerry Kuckelman, who serves as our immediate past president, one of our volunteer officers. Jerry, thanks for being here. Dean, thanks for your work. And thank you all for a few minutes. And we really want to help. And please let us know how we can do so.
It's been a long night. I appreciate you all taking the time to sit here and hope got some valuable information. There's a few people I would just need to make sure we point out. As some of you walked in this evening, there's a company that's been working with the Department of Agriculture called Hitchpin, and Emily's in the back and her staff will be there to help connect need as you see it. Please, as Giles Ranch, Jenny Bouchard shared, please don't be afraid to ask. Lots of people wanting to give across the country. Our organization, just like KLA, is being flooded with calls of people. Where do I drop this load? I got 3 tonight during this meeting of where can I deliver something to somebody in this room? I know many others, and I want to call on Lynn Hendrickson with the Farm Rescue was here this evening. Their cards are in the back, wanting to help folks have been in the area. I want to thank the Natoma School District. Dale and Kevin Eichhoff set all this up, walked in the room. That was an unbelievable nice thing that they did. Appreciate Natoma School District letting us host this here. Also in this, Matt, the superintendent, thank you. I got to mention Jill Gonzalez, Tanner Lyle, Eva Meyer, Amy Miller, Heather Lyle. I had the chance to work with them off and on. They deserve a tremendous round of applause. They don't want to be given any credit, but they truly are doing a wonderful thing in this community. So thank you. I'm sure I missed someone in your crew. I apologize for that, but I know you're doing great work. Travel safe. Our organizations, I'm with Kansas Farm Bureau. Our folks here is Dale Maneth in the back, field staff, and Doug Zillinger on our state board. We've had several agents that kind of help serve. We're here to help, whether you're a member or not. We just want to see our industry survive and thrive in this area, and that's best for all of us. Have a safe trip home. Thank you very much.